am Cynthia, and I'm the host of the reality series CPS Horror Stories. I'm not a social worker or an attorney, but I am a mom who's had her children kidnapped by CPS. And after 2 years of fighting, I did get my kids back. And now I have this platform where other parents get to share their horrific story from CPS. So, Girsten, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, yes. My name is Girsten Bergquist, and I have had a case open for about 11 months now. I am now currently a mandated reporter myself. I have kind of switched gears, and now I'm a systems advocate. I used to be a domestic violence advocate, and I kind of moved in to try to help reform a lot of the systems right now that are in need. One of the things I'm trying to help with is passing the Senate Bill 1141 against coercive control. I work with a lot of DV survivors. I teach a DV support group. So I'm kind of very familiar with certain elements of even why these CPS and DCFS cases are open, and a lot of times the social workers get involved. So thank you for having me, Cynthia, so much. Thanks for letting me be here.
Of course. So, do you have history of being in the foster system as a child?
I do not. I do not. This has been a completely new type of underground world, really, that I've been indicted into. It's been the most intense year of my life, my child's life, and it's been heartbreaking to see. What I do believe, I'm in the same boat, that I think this is legal kidnapping as well. And I definitely like to use that terminology because all of the elements are there. And without certain reform procedures, it's going to be really hard for things to change. So that's why it's really important to get these stories out there.
So tell me, how did CPS get involved in the first place? Who called and what were the allegations?
Well, it was an interesting beginning. I was assaulted on my birthday in a public place. It was captured on surveillance video, and I had injuries. So I went to the hospital and stayed a night at the hospital. And while I was there, they treated me for a few hours and tried to discharge me. Upon that discharge, apparently I had a pretty severe type of anxiety attack where I planned not to go back home, and I started kind of like, trailing these little hints that something wasn't right. And at that time, I was still too scared to talk to the police. So a social worker came and talked to me, and in my mind of just, severe shock and devastation, I ended up opening up to her completely. And even reading the hospital reports, it's kind of obvious now why she decided to send a social worker to go check on my son the following day at school. She did a well check. What she didn't include in her report was that the child was never left at home with his father. I actually had a family member living with me. And so I think in her mind, she thought this child was at home by himself with the perpetrator. And I was just too scared, and I was going to go back home and there's going to be more repercussions. So I believe that's why she sent in a social worker to interview my son. They kept checking on us for about 2 months. At that point, I was able to file a police report about 4 days later after the assault. It wasn't easy. It took me 3 days of negotiations and bartering with my son's father to try to leave, take it to a shelter, to get out of the house to safety. He basically sequestered me for 72 hours and really put forward some severe tactics.
So where did we leave off?
So I think I was talking about the release from the hospital. So I was released from the hospital. For 3 days, it was bartering and negotiations, basically trying to get me to not report anything to the police, to law enforcement. Not that I agreed, but I tried to remain calm. I tried to strategize in my head. Eventually, I was able to go to law enforcement and file a police report a few days later. What happened in those 3 and 4 days involved a lot of negotiations and leverage and blackmail about getting my son indicted into the foster care system. He specifically said that CPS would get involved, that my child could be possibly removed. There was all sorts of claims. And at that point, I was very unversed in the work that even these social service agencies do. So it was pretty intense. And at the time, I don't think that I actually really bought it, to be honest. I didn't think that the retaliation and the leverage would actually be set forth. So after I went to the police about for 2 months, DCFS was checking in, and they were doing well checks and offering services for our family. And I participated and I complied. And I guess at the time, I really did believe that this was an agency that was out to assist and out to help. Meanwhile, what I didn't really understand was that my son's father had already been talking to the agency, the department, and he only talked with his attorney present, which is pretty interesting considering that I met with them dozens of times, let them walk through my home, see holes that were punched in the door, and really had to kind of explain even why that was something that was still locked in a piece of wood in a door jamb. And I didn't really have too many answers at that point. I think it was still really processing the amount of violence that had occurred in the later part. While I had already been kind of plotting and planning a leave. So during that 2 months, these social workers were checking in, complying, and then actually a decision was made that I would keep my children, 2 of them. I had a 17-year-old at the time, and at that time my son was 10. He had just turned 10. And once I showed up to the courthouse to basically, I guess, have my case officially closed, they actually did not have me anywhere in the system, on the books, in the computers. My name was not there at the 3 check-in stations that I went to, which I thought was very peculiar. Later that night, I had a social worker reach out to me and ask if they could come over to do an evaluation later on that day.
Yeah, start again with when they came to your house.
Okay, yes. So it was a very interesting night because I had already been expecting them for a few hours. It was a last-minute request to come over. And at that point, I had put down some cheese and crackers on the table and some other hors d'oeuvres and was waiting for them while my son was eating a very nice plate of brown rice and orange chicken. And they come in, knock, knock, 4 police officers, 2 social workers, and they hand me some papers, and it was a warrant saying that they were going to be taking my child. Oh boy, I think at that point I really went into severe shock. I really shut down. I almost fainted. It was very intense. And the whole time my son was sitting there at the table, kind of watching onward as I was almost negotiating. I was negotiating with them and trying to rationalize why this was happening in the first place. Because at this point, I was clueless. At this point, it was honestly my understanding that I was to be having both of my children, my son and my daughter, and they handed me 2 warrants, one for my son's removal, one for my daughter. At that point, my daughter was not living with me. So she actually was not removed that night. She was already staying with somebody for a school that she went to out of the area. And so it was my son that was removed. And because they didn't have any family members that I could immediately give them to take him, they decided to put him into a foreign foster home. And that's when things really ramped up and got very intense. And of course, he was shell-shocked and heartbroken. And very distraught. I've never seen my son, who was a very strong boy, get that devastated before in my life, in his life. And it was the most heartbreaking thing to witness. He's sitting there hugging his dog goodbye, crying, begging, pleading. I literally walked down to the car with my son, held in all my tears, held in everything that I could possibly hold on to so I wouldn't scare him further. And I helped him get in the car, and he's bawling and he's screaming and yelling and he's calling my name, and they are driving down the street. And I didn't see him again for about a week and a half until we had our first hearing in court. Throughout that time, it was the worst I could even imagine. I would speak to my son on the phone multiple times a day, where I wouldn't even be able to hear him enunciate a word because he couldn't even catch a breath and gather himself while he was crying so hard. Like I said, my son was a very, very strong boy, an athlete, and very, very man's boy. So it was very intense to see my son morph from being a normal kid to all of a sudden being very traumatized. And at that point, he was kept in a foreign home for a couple weeks until he was placed with other caregivers that were friends of the family, basically, extended family. And the caregivers or the foster family that he was with, supposedly a lot of things happen in that home, but he is unwilling to talk about it still to this day. So it's very alarming, and it's not something that I press. It's not something that I actually am able to even speak about right now with him. So unfortunately, it's something that we have to address in therapy. Yes, he was removed, and then for about 4 to 5 months, he stayed with caregivers who continued to emotionally and verbally be very abusive. I actually, at one point, had a very severe incident of where I was not in contact with him for over 21 days. And as I know, that is against parental rights, especially at that point. We didn't actually have a hearing to really cement his placement for a few more months. And at that point, we actually had asked to change his location from one caregiver's, the ones that were kind of emotionally and verbally abusing him, to his grandmother. And that turned out to be a better situation. It's been 10 months. I have finally hit a point where now I am reunified with my son 50% of the time. His father gets the other 50% of the time. And the case will remain open for another year, where they will continue to do checks and evaluations and check up on us and do their diligence. So the case won't officially be closed for another year. So that's kind of like the basics of my entry into this world. And ever since, because of my work with domestic violence survivors, I've recognized, and even just hearing your show, and even the KABC show, as we know, there are a lot of, as Vince W. says, vengeful exes out there, and people who have the mind and the guts to retaliate with defaming their partner. And it's taken me a year to cross out allegations about, over 55 pages of allegations, actually, as it turned out, from my son's father. In court, it was actually a very large surprise, because it turned out that he had turned in everything about me that he possibly could that would look like any kind of character smear. So There are a lot of things that I've had to do that were court ordered in order to, I guess, discount all these allegations and also rebuild my reputation almost. So it's been a year of consistently trying to prove myself by crossing off one line after another to get my son back. I had to take a bunch of classes. I had to be on regular testing. I've had to I was even court ordered to go to substance abuse programs, 12-step meeting sessions when I don't even have an issue. So it's been pretty hard, but I've complied and I've tried to drink the Kool-Aid as much as possible and try to just go with it. And I'm sure, as you know also, is that the appointed lawyers, they almost seem like they are there to facilitate the departments getting away with even more things. The courts, I just feel like it's an enabling system from the bottom up. And this is where I have a lot of issues and take a lot of issues and I've seen a lot of error and room for improvement. There is a lot of incompetence out there. There's a lot of misconduct and a lot of opportunities for malice to occur. In this case, the initial investigator left in a bunch of false statements. She left in a lot of commentary that was unsubstantiated in any reality. And I think what baffled me most about dependency juvenile court is that hearsay is admissible in court. So any evidence, especially written evidence, is gladly accepted in this type of court. And I think that's where a lot of issues happen, and a lot of mothers especially are forced and coerced to take plea deals or accept charges or be backed up against the wall with ultimatums. And it's very scary. It's very intense because at the end of the day, you don't know if your child is going to be lost to the foster care system forever, because that is always the veiled threat. And I think that is where we really we need to draw a line. And there really needs to be a lot of change and support in making sure that these reporters who are under oath to do the best of their ability actually do their complete work and their complete investigations before they devastate children and supply the system with even more people that are disabled, more people that have mental issues and mental illness that needs to be corrected, and on welfare for the rest of their lives. I mean, this is a continual pit of taking children that are not developed yet, indicting them and inducing them with so many issues, they will forever be dependent and reliant most of the times on the system. A lot of times parents they can't even keep up. There are parents that do get defeated, and they literally find almost a way of thinking where they will jump through hoops and bounds to get their child back. They'll do whatever they can, but ultimately they never will. And so there are many parents that do give up. There are parents that have made complaints and have been retaliated against, with their children taken from them forever. So it's a very, very scary process. It's fearful for the children especially, but the parents that are trying to navigate and work so hard to get their kids back, only to be continually judged and continually put down and almost hindered in their progress, just to keep supplying a constant feed of kids into the foster care system, where ultimately all these people are putting their kids through college, putting food on their table night after night on our children's dime, costing them their emotional, their physical, their mental well-being. So it's something that I obviously feel very passionate about, and I'm here to help. And I'm here to help especially mothers. I advocate for many mothers with open DCFS cases, and I really help them see what the tools are that will help them get through the system faster. Now, I got through in 10 months, where I have females in my classes that I teach that had their kids taken for 2 to 3 years, and they're in no sight, or they have had no progress, and nobody knows when they're getting those kids back. Fortunately, I tried the best I could to really be aggressive, to educate myself, So through asking for things, even like a rap team, even asking for CFT meetings or a team meeting, being integrated in all these processes of these departments has done tremendous, a lot of progress for me. So that's the way I kind of have counteracted a lot of these impediments that I've had to struggle with this last year. And through the acquired knowledge, I'm able to help other women get their cases through a lot quicker as well. So I hope that gives you a good background, Cynthia. Thank you for letting me introduce this part.
Absolutely. I can't agree more with what you said, you know, especially with the trauma that is caused to the kids and how it affects their mental health. It's sad. It's so sad.
So sad. They don't, they don't deserve it. They're innocent parties to this, and to be punished almost unnecessarily. And the way they don't even let the kids be informed of any particulars about the case. So the kids are left to guess. They're left to wonder if it's their fault. My son struggled this for maybe 8 months. That's the majority of the case. He literally thought it was his fault. And nobody wants to update him. And what kills me too is that the dependency lawyer that represents the child, like, they don't even disclose information to them so they could make proper requests or state their conditions. That's what also is so weird, Cynthia, is that, like, literally I had a hearing last week where all my son heard, they had the whole meeting, the whole hearing paused, except for the part where the attorney asked the judge to keep me on random testing. So that's what my kid heard. There was a 10-minute hearing, and all he hears is the lawyer taking off mute button and her talking about drug use. So it's maddening. It's maddening. Because now your kid is they're wondering about you. They're wondering if they could trust you. They don't know what's going on. They don't know if it's them. It's just so traumatizing to see your kid's devastation, obviously, right? And I know you went with it with your daughter, and honestly, what you're doing right now with your daughter is brilliant. I think this show, like, honestly, when my son gets of age, I had the same thought, because I want to know what happened those days.
Yeah.
Someday.
That's why she does that. And it's hard getting kids because a lot of parents didn't get their kids back, you know? So it's hard to find children who've been in the system that would be willing to talk.
It's so scarring. It's hard to talk about that trauma. I mean, even with a therapist, it's hard for these kids to talk. A lot of times they're so shut down to their therapists, to their social workers. Like, how does diligence get done, really?
Right.
If a child is actually shut down to the point where they're protecting, especially abusive partner, and a lot of times that is the male. And a lot of these children do have already instilled almost daddy complexes because of the way perpetrators are kind of already designed. So I don't really understand. I understand the failure to protect, right, in regards to maybe very severe cases where the mother just continually did not walk away when she needed to after dozens of violent moments in front of the child. I get that. My son never witnessed me even fighting in front of my ex. He never even saw me drinking from home. So a lot of these allegations that could have been grounded and cleared up never were. So it just leaves a trail for more and more defamation and more enabling to occur. I think that the coercive control bill is a pure example of what has happened in my situation. Everything on the coercive control bill could be actually prosecuted if it goes through. This case that went to DCFS, to this department, they were supplied false accusations, and they decided to still go forth. They still decided, even though with audio evidence, video evidence of blackmail, of basically leveraging, taking advantage of the welfare system, welfare fraud, basically. I mean, This man frauded the welfare system, got our child put in the system. DCFS is completely aware of that. They're completely aware. They have evidence and everything. And you know what? That doesn't even get reported to court. That doesn't even get submitted to the court. So I feel like no one will ever know the reality of this. And that's what's also such a mind conundrum, because you're like, how do I affect change when all these parents who rightfully should be scared not to talk, because honestly, that's your kid. You can't, it's really hard to be leveraged with the uncertainty of maybe never ever seeing your child again. They say that, it's like, you don't sign these papers, your child could be put into foster care forever. You do realize that. And it's so matter of fact. It's so callous and cold, so cold. So I don't know, Cynthia, I would love to, I don't know. I would love to help in any way I can. I know you're in touch with so many people, but honestly, I try to join every group possible about, reform. I try to look for class actions. I'm trying to file something myself because honestly, at the end of the day, like, this isn't okay. It's like these kids are really being destroyed to the point where, like, as we know, suicide rates are up. Children are committing suicide earlier and earlier every year. But what is this doing to them? It's just supplying that reason.
Exactly what it's doing. I do feel lucky about the way that my kids were taken, because I didn't have to watch them fight. I did after a visit. I don't want you to leave. I want to be with you. Take me home. And that's horrific. But I can't imagine the initial removal and my kids crying and freaking out the way yours was.
Yeah, it was really, it's a nightmare. I mean, I literally feel like I definitely have some kind of PTSD about it, because it's one of those things that recurs in my mind almost daily. And for all that time that I didn't have him, oh my goodness. What killed me though was that I found out later on, one of the things that he did tell me later on was that he ended up crying for that whole drive, an hour, just whimpering. And the social worker, all he could do was tell them to be quiet, even shut up. And my son pled to go to the bathroom, to go to the restroom, to use the restroom. It was an hour drive, hour or more. And he denied him that right even. He wouldn't even do that. He was cold, he was quick, and he didn't even talk to him during the whole time. And they just dump him off, at a stranger's home. Let him call me that night once, and I just remember him just huffing and not being able to catch his breath to even utter two words together. So yeah, it's so devastating. And that's what the most crushing thing is. And for any of this to be prevented and be preventable, like, what do we do?
There's nothing. It's out of our hands completely. It's not fair.
It's like from the judges all the way down to the workers, the investigators. It's just like, wow, we're corralled. And you know what? I had a therapist at the beginning of this that stopped me mid-sentence and just said, okay, Miss Bergquist, let's not talk about DCFS. Okay, you got to realize they're the Gestapo. Nothing we can do about it. And for me, it's like, I can't take that answer, Cynthia. I'm like, I found a march in downtown LA. I don't know if it's happened yet, but there was a march that was supposed to be scheduled soon to demonstrate the corruption and the reform that's needed. And these are the things that I'm like, I want to get these things together, but ultimately, like, there's too many people that are in the system that are also still, that will be in it for a long time, if not forever. Like, I've literally reached out to mothers who have filed complaints, and it's been 8 years with their cases still open. They see their kids twice a week for a couple hours a visit. It's disgusting. It's intolerable. So I feel like there needs to be some kind of network or organization that can help do checks and balances for these agencies. Because without any how do they have the authority, the same the same rights as judges do, as judicial officers. They hold the same power. So how, and they're not even trauma informed. Half of these people, they can't recognize what the effects are from the removal. They always just base it basically on the allegations. Oh, the trauma that your child has is from the allegations that are against you, not from the emergency removal.
No.
Like, really? Because my child did not act like this. He did not behave like this. He did not, have tendencies as he does to almost, you see anxiety manifest in kids so many different ways. In my son, it's actually, he likes to stretch out his mouth, so he gets a blister right here. He starts picking his cuticles to the point where they're bleeding, or his nose where it's bleeding. And it's like, this is the real thing. And then what do they do when they grow up? They still have that same unresolved, because they're too traumatized to talk about. They've been told not to talk about it, if not threatened. So I don't know, Cynthia. do you have any questions, or is there anything that I could answer that might be a little bit more?
So how was his experience? Did they ever take your daughter away?
No, they never physically took her away, because she was already staying with a family member. So eventually my son went to that family member. So what happened with my daughter actually was a very interesting story. When I came out with after filing the police report and my ex was arrested, I actually had a sit down talk with her and kind of explain to her, because she was 17 going on 18. So I figured that she could actually benefit from having this talk as a young woman. So I kind of finally opened up to her about the things that I had been enduring over the years. I kind of finally escalated to physical violence. And I even showed her the power and control wheel. And she looked at it and she said, "Mommy, did all these things happen to you? I mean, did you write this?" Like, she thought I made that power and control wheel, because everything that was listed on there is something that had happened to me during that relationship. But it took years for it to really, really ramp up to the point where, yeah, he's going to lose it in public and disable me, basically. So she ends up telling me about a situation, or many situations, where her biological father, who she had been living with for the last few years, had been very, not only just verbally abusive with her, but had actually tried to cross other lines, as it turns out. And that's what really devastated me, because now I have a daughter that's now opening up about abuse in the home that I've trusted her into for the last 4 years. So I immediately pulled her out of that home and put her with other family members in the area which she was going to school. She went to an academic specialty school, basically, and she wanted to graduate. It was her senior year, so she stays in there. And then basically DCFS just closes her out, even though there's allegations now against her biological father. They decided, you know what, because she's 17, she's too old. She's not worth our time. She's not worth our money, because guess what? She'll be out of the system in 6 months. So is that really worth our time, getting all these social workers to get around wraparound services and all this stuff for her? I mean, when you think about the money, yeah, it doesn't make sense for them. And that's what it's motivated by. That's how you can tell. Because if they're not willing to invest on a 17-year-old girl who's been abused by her father, and dump her out without any acknowledgement or any prosecution even of that father, who a case was initially opened up against after I let the social workers know. And this was before my son was removed. So that's why both of my children were on the order, because now they're charging me for failure to protect against two fathers. And I'm like, but I'm doing the right thing. I mean, I filed a restraining order. And guess what, Cynthia? That restraining order was used against me in court as evidence of a problem that existed at home. So I'm feeling stupid, like I even went to the police in the first place, right? And that's the sad part, is that a lot of times you talk to, especially immigrant families, you talk to them about going to police, and they will freak out, because they know that social services is coming. And the sad part is that, like, I had no idea. Yeah, I mean, I felt so ignorant, so stupid. because I was like, wow, all these women that freaked out when I told them that I went to the cops after being physically assaulted on my birthday are now saying that that I was foolish, you know? And now I'm thinking, wait a minute, victim blaming? Like, seriously, are we doing this? Like, woman to woman? But then there's a I told you so moment, because now I'm coming back to them and be like, well, I don't even have my kids now. Well, you know, like, are you surprised? And that's what I don't understand. Like, how could there be, I don't know. It just and I don't like also the fact that they prey on the uneducated. They prey and they bank on you not speaking English, not being able to read. That's how they want you. That's how they want you, so they can basically bid your kid off to the highest bidder. Like, that's really how it feels. It's mind-boggling. I've just seen so much, Cynthia, that it's so hard to see. I cannot continue to just not do anything. That's why I kind of just want to, I want to do petitions. I want to do change.org. Like, we have to do something.
Right.
Like, who is somebody that are there any politicians even that we can write to? Are you aware of any?
No.
Nobody wants to touch them.
Nobody does.
It's just, I don't know. And it's good to have this show, Cynthia. I'm so proud that this exists, and so proud of you for really doing the groundwork and getting these stories out there, because without this, nobody knows. The thing is, I grew up in Orange County. I spent 10 years of my life living in Beverly Hills. I didn't have a social network where people were, if this happened, they were not going to talk about it. Like, women amongst my crowds, they wouldn't talk about abuse. They wouldn't talk about, even if their children did get taken, I mean, you're just never going to hear from them. I mean, your reputation, your livelihood, your money's on the line. So those people are unwilling even more to speak up. So now we have literally, it's just like the pool of people that can be forthcoming, that can share. They're scared, or they're unable to, they're afraid of losing something, whether it's their kids or their livelihood. So there's no incentive really to speak. And that's the thing. It's like, it's so sad that it's just such an enabling form of kidnapping.
And you said that your son goes back and forth between you and dad?
So yes, this just started.
And wasn't dad an abuser?
Mm-hmm. That's what was interesting about this, is that they decided this whole time to liberalize us exactly the same. And what also kills me is that for whatever reason, he never really did a 52-week program, as it turns out. He completed some, but somebody made some kind of a deal with him while he was midway through or something like that, where he didn't actually have to finish. So there's that. There's the fact that we even have a worker on our case that won't talk to him and speak to him because of the disrespect and the abuse and the belligerency that he displays on calls. So she recommends him to a supervisor. So he goes up, through the ranks of the supervisors and keep bugging them and defaming me, and just keeps claiming, hammering them down, that I'm too unstable, that I'm too mentally ill. And that's the thing, that those are the only two things that you will hear perpetrators say about their exes, is they'll say that they're crazy, and they'll say that they're an addict. Yeah. Those are their fallbacks. I was called those things too. It's their fallbacks. I'm like, man, you know what? Look at my test that you thank you. Like, you had me on test for a year of my life. I've been calling that line for a year. So sure, you want to say I'm an addict? Look at those tests, buddy. Look at those tests. Yep. It doesn't make any sense. So yes, they liberalized us at the same time. What got me was that they went from, because my son was on a restraining order. He was protected by my order that I had filed. So they went ahead and they started modifying the order. So pretty soon my son is being picked up from an undisclosed location by a DCFS driver, taken to another undisclosed location with a paid monitor to have a visitation, right, with his father. And they go from that to 1 week to unmonitored the next week, like unmonitored half-day visits the next week. And I was baffled, what's the rush? Like, clearly, if he's displaying any kind of aggression towards your social workers, towards the RAP team, the psychological assessment team, and this is documented. I mean, everything is documented. You see it all in court, so you know what's going on. And to see the progress that's not being made, but the progress in the case that's being liberalized without actually seeing progress is maddening. You know, and I mean, at the end of the day, yes, I'm glad that I get to see my son half the time. I'm not happy, though, that they're aware of the blackmail. They're aware of all the inconsistencies of the case that prove that this is still somebody that's unstable. They waive, actually, the psych assessment. They waive it. They're taking somebody with violent tendencies who admits to child abuse, who admits to spousal abuse, and don't do anything. They don't do anything. They don't remand him to anything. They don't prosecute him correctly. In fact, the reason why I had to take the failure to protect was because they offered it to him first, Cynthia. They offered him a version that was watered down, a liquidated version where they crossed out almost half of the allegations, mostly directly related to the DV in the case. And they left it all, making it look like I had severe issues that made me look like a reckless party girl, basically, you know? And that's what I didn't understand. I had coached baseball for 3 years. I had coached teams of boys only. I was an active community member, a volunteer. And so I had a presence in my town of Beverly Hills. And to be a pillar over there and to be somebody that was really, really involved, to all of a sudden having to go around asking all these president and vice president of the baseball league to write letters on my son's behalf to keep him in activities that would keep him mentally stable. And then honestly, like to have that yanked away from him, to have him tell me I can't coach his team anymore. I mean, it was so degrading. I'm like, do you know how bad my son needs me right now as an example, being one of the only females in a league of men that are coaching young boys? He needs this example because right now, like, he's going through a lot of stuff. He's seeing women be mistreated all the time now and being talked down to by various, you know, the caregivers. Now he has his father's example, all these men. And I'm like, he needs this right now for his health. They don't even want to grant that. So it's been hard. It's been very hard because it's been a very difficult navigation of always having to negotiate and get shut down. So the only reason why, like, I have my kid back now is because, like, I took all these classes seriously. I got all my completion certificates, but guess what? I could have got my son back months ago because I completed my completions, like my certificates, months ago. But because the father hadn't completed all of his requirements, they were waiting on it. They're waiting on him. I'm a fit parent. I just proved myself to you guys. I finished my case plan. Why do I not have my child back? Sure, let's wait another 3 months. Let's blame it on the pandemic. But seriously, it's I don't know. I'm very dismayed. There's so many questions that I feel like we're never going to have answers to. And it's just the way it is. And it's unacceptable. Have you met other mothers by any chance that are from other, like, higher income communities that have been able to come out and talk about this stuff? Like, have you met some that are willing and able?
That have money, you're asking?
Well, money, or like not even that, but like from like higher income areas. Yeah, like from areas that are where you don't really perceive this stuff happens, because it does happen. It's just they don't talk about it. That's what kind of is sad, you know?
Yeah, I would say that the majority of people I talk to don't have the money.
I mean, when I went to the Beverly Hills police station to drop over a copy of the restraining order, and I had mentioned, as soon as my son was removed, I started finding all this evidence of of stuff that would back up the coercion and everything else that I was talking about. And as soon as I told her about the removal, she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This actually happens to women quite a lot here." And I said, wow, because guess what? These perpetrators, because they are educated, because they have influence, they are able to get the ball rolling. They are able to defame you to the best of their degree, because why? They're credible. They have some kind of substantial social backing out there that makes them a prominent person, and people take them seriously. And honestly, at the end of the day, I feel like my social workers would even open up to me and say, this is a complete case of white male privilege. Your ex is getting away with this because he's a man who is a substantial figure out there, who has money, who knows how to talk and walk the walk. He's intimidating. People buy it.
Yeah. It usually goes that way. The person who has the majority money wins, in a sense. They get to do whatever they want. Take however long they need, and it's not fair.
It's really not. I've heard of that doctor. It was a female doctor in Beverly Hills who filed a complaint actually for her 3 kids. Did you hear about that case where
Nope.
there was some allegations of, I guess her ex was abused, very abusive, and her kids were removed for a little time and then placed back with their father, the perpetrator. And some things happened. I think they got injured, and she ended up filing a settlement for $3 million. And I believe only won like less than 300 grand. Like, it wasn't even that much, but at least she did it, you know?
Yeah.
At least it says something. But this is the kind of thing where I just feel so, I feel inclined to just keep going to make the right people accountable, you know, to raise awareness, to show them like people concrete examples of how like the welfare system pertaining to foster care really, really works. And as you know, I saw the stats that you have on your site for this and how many kids are removed each day. And how many is that again? Like thousands, right? And I mean, think about that every day, that's how many thousands of kids are getting induced with mental illness just to be either copy what they've experienced, you know, and out there in the world, or be incarcerated, or fall into, like I said, disability or unemployment for the rest of their lives. This is really what we're doing. We're supplying the system with this. Yeah, I can't wait though for my son to get older and actually be doing what your daughter is. I really commend her on that. That's very brave. And I think honestly, you're a very strong leader. You're a very strong woman to even have a passion like this and be okay with just saying, F it, I'm going to do it.
It's hard.
So it's hard, but honestly, like you're an angel out there doing, like, you're doing work and you're sowing the seeds, and this is where it starts. So I'm just, anything I can do to help you, Cynthia, like, I'm so down.
I appreciate it. How old is your son again?
He just turned 11.
Would he want to share his story with things that happened?
I think so eventually. I think so for sure. I think so. He's a little bit, you know, he's coming around. We're getting reacquainted. We're getting readjusted to the new norm around here. But ultimately, he knows what I'm doing. He knows that I'm an activist now. He knows that I'm very, very passionate about these causes. So I think that he's definitely on the bandwagon to also affect this change that we need, because he sees kids being messed up too. He had in his first home, he had 4 kids that he was locked up with in a room, where all the kids had to like stay in a room, not leave. They couldn't share stuff. Their stuff would get raided every night, like thrown and strewn everywhere. I mean, those initial foreign foster homes, I mean, they're not healthy people. I'm sorry. I've heard so many horrible, nasty nightmares. The ones that will take kids right off the cusp at a spare of a hat, like, I'm sorry, like, I've heard really bad things. I know you have too, but seriously, these children, they get so traumatized. I mean, like, we know sexual abuse, physical abuse, but guess what? I heard from literally a social worker, as long as you're not being beaten, it's okay. I've heard that phrase before. And I'm like, really? Because my son now has eating disorder because he was fed Domino's every day for 2 weeks, is stress eating, gained weight. He has heart conditions. Like, what are you talking about? As long as you're being beaten, it's okay. He's weighing himself now. He has an eating disorder. He refuses food. He might even be bulimic. He's 10 years old. Like, that's okay? Like, he has to have a black eye in order for it not to be okay? Like, it doesn't make any sense, because now he's going to be forever having weird associations with his body that's going to be making him feel bad and ultimately causing him, you know, he could have dissociation. He can have all sorts of stuff. So all these kids literally have their own customized group of issues that they will forever have to solve. And when parents get back, guess what? Guess what it's like? It's like rehabilitating a baby tiger back into the wild, because they have to learn how to eat again. They have to learn how to walk again. They have to learn how to follow structure and discipline and be good students. And right now with virtual learning and the pandemic, it's like, wow, these kids are lost. They're lost. They now have ADHD. They have all these problems where they can't even learn. And then social workers get surprised that their behavior is not the best it can be. They're not getting the best grades. Really? They're distracted because they're missing their parents. They're heartbroken. They're confused. They're devastated. Like, how do you miss that boat? And how do you get a job where you can't recognize trauma properly? If that's what you do, if you're sworn to take an oath that protects children, how would you not know what trauma actually looks like and how it manifests itself? So like, even like stepping up the training, stepping up the qualifications to get these people who are ultimately legally kidnapping our kids taken away, why not get a real sheet full of different requirements? And if you meet certain boxes, sure, that kid warrants removal. But if all you're going off of is accusations from an abusive party, like, I'm sorry, like, who has the credibility here? The person who filed a restraining order 2 months back, who's notified the government there was a problem, who's asked for protection, only to have that kid snatched, who was protected on it, and then shown, you know, I'm showing the freaking restraining order in court. Oh, well, this is a 70-page restraining order full of examples of how you stayed through all this stuff. And what my lawyer would tell me is, did you know that as soon as the first sign of abuse happens, whether it's economic, whether it's mental, whatever it's emotional, anything, verbal, you are supposed to walk away. The government wants you to walk away. And if you don't walk away, you are deemed responsible for being a negligent parent. I'm like, who doesn't have issues in the relationship? Who doesn't know even what to do when you are abused? Who knows even what abuse is? There's a lot of people out there who don't even know they're being abused. So really, failure to protect and then saying that you're going to be charged with child neglect and child abuse, like it's like, wow. Because that was the leverage. It was like, you don't take a plea deal, you will be in a child abuse database. I never hurt my, like, I'm just like, I never hurt my son. I did the right thing as soon as I was physically abused. What else? Like, what could I have done differently? And ultimately nothing. Because it was just another, like I said, it was just another number for them to take to supply that quota that they have to meet for the day, right? Development, the change needs to happen ASAP.
I agree.
Did you come from a DV background or anything too? Was that part of your case or anything?
Nope. But a lot of the people I talk to, it is a pattern. They were in the system as a child, and then their kids get removed.
So it just happens throughout the generations almost. It's like, yep. And I could see that. I mean, the problem here is that if you're creating damaged goods to produce more damaged goods to supply a corrupt system, pretty soon it's just like the quota of people that are scarred and hurt and traumatized is just exponentially going up.
I don't even have words sometimes, you know, dealing with all of this and listening to parents, because it's just sad.
It's a sucker. I can't believe that you can even do this day after day, honestly, because it's very taxing and tolling to hear all the bad, evil stuff that happens out there, and the way, like, there are no protections from it. So it's just it's a pool of feeling defeated. And to hear like all these mothers, yeah, I mean, honestly, I have mothers that like, I usually prep them before they go to court the day before. And I really try to gently prep them for the worst case scenario, because I mean, I've gone to the courts and seen like babies or little small children be ripped out of their mother's hands, like right after the hearing. Moms are crying. I know at like Edelman's over here in California, a couple years ago, a mom jumped to her death from the parking structure right after her hearing. I don't actually understand how that doesn't happen every day with the amount of kids that are taken away, because ultimately, if you don't have hope, and there's a lot of people that don't, there's a lot of people that as soon as their kids are taken, that's the ultimate worst thing that could ever happen. It feels like death. It feels like death of a child almost. And then you're loomed with like the possibility of maybe you'll get back your kid, but maybe you won't, and maybe they'll be raffled off to the system forever. So you feel like there's no choice. And if you're not in your right state of mind, because you're in shock and your child was just ripped from your hands, like, yeah, what would stop the average Joe from actually jumping? Like, there's a lot of times when obviously you're going to feel like that. And if you're creating that kind of devastation and trauma within women who have a physical attachment to their babies that are being like pried from their hands, why would you, I mean, seriously, I feel so bad for that mother that I did read about from a couple of years ago, because ultimately, like, someone needs to be there for these moms. If they're going to go through this, they do need an advocate. Like, I was lucky. I had my Peace Over Violence advocate with me the days where I came. They were very great to me. They always were there to echelon me. And that's why, honestly, I held it together. And that's why what I do for moms now is because I know that you need a partner there who knows the system, who knows when to raise your hand to talk to your lawyer the right way. I couldn't even talk. You know, when they asked me to sign papers, I was like, they felt inconvenienced by me because I didn't want to make up my mind in 5 minutes. They were like, well, we're going to have to get to this after lunch, I guess. After I sat there staring at the paper for an hour, refusing to sign it. I was like, there's no way. I'm waiving all my rights. Like, no, why would I do that? I'm fine. Like, I could get 30 character letters for you from different parents in my community in a heartbeat. Why would you want to take my child away? It doesn't make any sense. So like, it's something that mothers need to be aware of, especially if you're going to go in and file a restraining order. I think it would be helpful for the public to know that this could be a possibility, and it's not saved as a dirty trick for the perpetrators that actually do the research on how to get back at their exes, or how to get off on. And you know what, this is the thing too, is just that you get off by putting your child in the foster care system. You get off on so many things. You don't have to be with your child anymore. You don't have to pay for that child anymore until they come back at you for recuperating the money that the parents are taking. That's the only time. But a lot of times, like, that's a what if for a lot of the perps. They don't realize that. They're just like, oh, no, you know what? I'm going to discredit this victim, this survivor, by saying everything I can bad about this person to defame them to the point where they will not be taken seriously in the criminal case. Perfect way to victim blame and victim shame somebody to be discredited. And ultimately, that's what happened. Because guess what, Cynthia? I have had trouble from the DA down to the the city attorney, trying to get this prosecuted because of what's happened in the DCFS case. Because for them to have this case open, it now verifies the claims that were said about me that supposedly made me hallucinate the assault in the first place. Even after I have hospital records, even after I have a surveillance tape, they don't even want the surveillance tape. They're calling it inconclusive. It literally shows a man pushing his wife across a bathroom while she's not looking. I was slammed against the wall of a ceramic wall. I slid down a wall between a toilet and a wall, had multiple injuries, spent a night in the hospital. Even with all that, I still can't get him prosecuted properly. And I shouldn't even be the one doing it. Why would I be the one doing the police work when I have to take care of my body because it's injured? Like, I don't understand that. So to have that, people say, okay, well, you know, because you go to court And the first thing that's then said about you is like, well, the DCFS case and the drug allegations, all this stuff. So now it's used against you in family court. It's used against you in criminal court to discredit you. So the prosecution can't do their job. So it's a top-down issue for survivors. Because this is a tactic. This is another tactic of control. And you hear it all the time. I mean, perps always use getting your children taken away or abducting your kids to either silence you or get back at you or so many other scenarios, but it keeps happening. It's just it's a continuous habit that perpetrators deploy. Social workers are aware, law enforcement is aware, many factions are aware, and yet nothing is done. So this is exactly why I do feel like the coercive control bill, the Senate Bill 1141 that Susan Rubio is proposing, be put into place. Because honestly, moms like me, moms that have been locked into a room, told that they will be forever haunted by their kids being in foster care, blah, 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 blah. You know what? Those perpetrators can get prosecuted all of a sudden. Because as soon as the line blurs from physical assault to any other kind of manipulation to get a victim to be silenced, that should be prosecuted. So really right now, like, I don't know. I want to start going like piece by piece and putting this back together. It's 2020, and then we have to get people on board. We have to get change moving, because ultimately, like, we can't have our grandkids. If my son has children that are in the system, like, and he becomes some kind of wife beater, like, I have failed. I have failed as a woman. I have failed as a mother, and I have failed as an advocate in this system. But the odds are high, because he's not the same, and he won't be the same.
Neither of my kids are the same either. It's sad.
It's heartbreaking.
My son, they both struggle with so much anger that they become violent.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard. It is hard. It's very hard. It's because that anger, especially when it's not going anywhere, it's so contained, and they've had, they don't have they don't have the correct coping mechanisms, because the trauma is sometimes so much to bear that you can't actually process it to affect change. So all you do sometimes is get locked in reacting, and you can't blame these kids. You can't blame them. It's a subconscious implant. So it's like, even if you do therapy, Cynthia, like, literally, you could do therapy for the rest of your life and never be your actualized self, your potential self. And that's the sad part too, is that all these kids have tremendous potential. And we're yanking it from them.
Yep.
We're yanking leaders from this world. We're yanking more change from this world, better people in this world, morals in this world. All that is going down the tubes. Cool. Do you get questions or anything?
There's none on here right now.
Okay.
Everybody's being just like encouraging you.
Okay. Thank you. I just want, obviously I always like to put this out there, but I do love advocating for women with open cases and finding them resources and help to get their cases completed sooner, their children back sooner. So definitely anybody who wants to reach out to me, I'm definitely still an advocate. I'm an activist. I want to spread the message. I'm a voice for the voiceless. So things that are very hard to talk about, I'm your girl, because I know how to sit in the uncomfortable.
Well, maybe you can come on our radio show Saturday night and share a little bit of this.
Please, I would love to. Anything that I could help with and rally up for you guys, I would love to be a part of this.
Okay, well, message us and get that info, and then we'll send it to you.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia, so much. I'm so sorry. I know this is hard. I know my heart's racing. I've been sweating, but I'm like, you know what? This needs to come out. This is actually one of the first times I've really got into detail about this live and on camera. I speak a lot about this and that pertaining to DV, but I haven't been able to actually rehash all these accounts yet. So I thank you for letting me get this story out there, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate. Mm-hmm. And At the end of the day, we just all need to support each other, and knowledge is power. The more you educate yourself, the more you know your rights, the better you can fight this thing. And, you know, you got to be strong. We got to stay together, and we got to share.
Yep, agreed. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for being brave and sharing your story and telling us what's happened with you and your kids. And I'm sorry that it happened, but it is, as bad as it sounds, it is nice to hear that it isn't just the poor people that get attacked.
No, it's unfortunate, but you know, the poor people are the ones more at risk, because they're the ones, like you said, since their children and their children's children are going to be indicted into the system. Probability wise, there's going to be money to be made there. It's all about the profits, and that's what we have to understand. All these industries that are based in making money off of people's trauma, like we're literally like sending their kids to college and putting food on their tables at the end of the day. And we have to remember, it's the same as policemen giving tickets, traffic tickets. It's like everybody has to meet a quota. Everybody has to perform. So you're just a number. You're not a face. You're not a person. No more. Like, it's not acceptable. So whatever I can do, I'll help. You got my word.
Appreciate it.
But thank you so much again for having me, and God bless you and your children and everybody here. Thank you so much for letting me share. I'm just so proud of you. Like I said, I'm just so proud that you share something that's so strong, where if you can't sit in the compliance anymore. And I'm proud that women like you exist. Like, honestly, you're an angel. So thank you for doing this work.
I appreciate that, honestly. And I hope, you guys, I hope you do get full custody, hearing what Dad has done, but at least you have half time and your son's out of the system.
Yes, thank you. We're making the best of it. And it's good to have your kid back and love on them and teach them, and try to, honestly, the best thing that you can do is always encourage your children to emote too.
Yes.
Especially in this case. Emotion is welcomed, as long as it's not directed into destruction. I always say, cry it out, let's talk it out. Yep. That's the best thing you can do for your kid. So thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much.
Let's keep in touch, okay?
I will, please. I will message you guys for Saturday.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All
okay.
Right. Bye.
Bye.